Hi everybody, today we look what actually a Lyra weapon is, what is the way to define it and to use it. Outcome is something like that. You have your character, you have for example your rifle, that comes straight from Lyra shooter core, so nothing new here. Yeah, looks good, hand AK looks great, so obviously that guy knows how to hold a rifle. Now a one-hand mace, kind of the same, yeah, looks kind of promising. This is a one-hand weapon. We also want to have the chance to use a two-hand weapon. Yeah, so that's a large two-hand sword. Also looks great. And the question is how to do that. How can we tell Lyra or a plugin from Lyra to use whatever weapon we want, simply import it and start playing with it? That is what we want to do. First, as always, we start with infographic. I actually have two examples. The longsword is already there. We will develop the mace. It starts with this WID. That is a Lyra equipment definition, and it's the most important file that you have. It defines a couple of gameplay texts, brushes, and a skeleton mesh. More importantly, it defines something like an ability set, an actor B weapon that defines some graphical effects. That's this one here. And most importantly, some sockets and transforms and a weapon instance that defines what kind of animation blueprints are to be used. Then we have two optional files. One is the Lyra pickup definition, weapon pickup definition, and the inventory item definition. Both are heavily used by the weapon spawner, but are not mandatory. If you just want to use a weapon in your game, all others are mandatory. So these 7 files, most easiest thing is actually to copy them from an existing one, like the longsword that I have in the plugin or the pistol that you can use. So the B weapon, as I said, is defining mostly graphical effects. Yeah, and in case of melee weapons like we do here, they're actually not really impactful. But the weapon instance is defining what kind of animation blueprints are to be used. We will actually use the unarmed animation blueprint mostly, and will then just add upper body animations on it. Other than that, we will have an animation blueprint per weapon, and we need the animation blueprint mannequin base to give us certain variables that we cannot get any other way. So I went to SketchFab. As always, a lot of great artists here. Here's Lexi4, created this Argonian Mace, whatever an Argonian is. We downloaded, should be a couple of megabytes, 100 or so. Here we are. And then really just import the FBX file into Lyra. If there's no FBX, you might have to use Blender, for example, to convert it. But other than that, it's quite simple. So let's add a new folder. We have the longsword already. So new one would be our mace. And then we just drop it in. Oh, new folder first. Yeah, that's the meshes, because we will get skeleton meshes and so on. Okay, dropping it, we say, yeah, we need a skeleton mesh here. Everything else is kind of standard. And yeah, complaining a bit, doesn't matter. And here we have our skeleton mesh, our physical asset. Looks good already. And yeah, it has a kind of skeleton, but doesn't matter what it is because we don't animate the weapon itself. The weapon is static. But we need a kind of root skeleton mesh to add a couple of sockets later. Sockets that define where our hands will be during the usage of the weapon. That is something that we will have to add. For the moment, we can just save it and have a look what is needed. If I look at my animation blueprint BA base, there is an event per animation frame that updates certain transforms, and the transform are for the left and the right hand. If I go to the class settings here, you see it's a child of ABP mannequin base. So using the mannequin base logic, we will update it every frame. That's important. First thing that we do on initialize is setting the pawn owner and see if it implemented an interface. If that is actually true, we will go to the pawn class, that's actually our hero, BA hero, and get the transform of both the sockets in real time. Meaning our hero has to implement an interface. That interface has a couple of things like left-hand socket transform and right-hand socket transform. So it gets the current weapon mesh. It gets a certain socket here. The socket is defined here. One for the left hand, one for the right hand. We have to make sure that these sockets are actually existing in our weapon. That's why we are looking here. So we copy that one. And then we pass it back to the animation blueprint to make sure that the animation blueprint knows where the left and right hand should be. Going to the skeleton, we add one of the sockets here. That is for the left hand, and the other one should be then for the right hand. Underscore R. Yeah. And then of course the question is, where should they be? Maybe not at that part of the weapon because that's a bit spiky. So we really just transform both sockets where we think it should be. We take this weapon as a one-hand weapon normally, but you can very easily switch between one hand and two hand in this setup here, just really with a bool parameter. The character will take the weapon in two hands, and then the left hand will be on the left hand socket here, and the right hand will be on the right hand socket here. This may be a bit down. So right hand stays the same, but the moment you switch to left hand, it will have a double grip here. Okay, saving this, then you can go to the skeleton, same thing, you can save that. So we have our skeleton here, we have our sockets here, so that is kind of prepared. So I cleaned up a bit and added a material, an extremely simple one. So we should also rename it a bit starting here, because that's not mace, that's Argonian Mace. Then, oh yeah, let's do redirect, fix up, okay. Then simple material, I just copied them really also from SketchFab in the same file. And looking at the longsword example, what we also need is some abilities, some animations, some gameplay effects. What we have is materials, meshes, and textures. So this is kind of defining what your weapon actually is. We need to do the very same kind of. We start copying the base files really. These 7 files are defining your weapon end to end, like we saw in the infographic. So going here, first thing I just rename really. And then we will really open it and put all the pointers to the different files so that the longsword is gone and everything is replaced with my Argonian Mace. Okay, then we need 2 animations. One is for kind of standing and running. The other thing is for crouching. As I said, it's only upper body, so it doesn't care what it runs or jumps or whatever. It's really just interesting what the upper body is doing, because that is what we will plug on top of the unarmed animation. So here we have a nice one for crouching, we have a nice one for walking. Both will go to the animation here and being a bit renamed so that we can find them again, that we have this Argonian Mace in the name. They're coming actually from Mixamo. Look at this channel here, there's a very easy way to import them. Okay. So every of these weapons comes with an animation blueprint that is specific to the weapon. This animation blueprint is fed from the outside with a couple of Boolean parameters and transforms. And of course these 2 animations that we just set. So what is the standing or running and walking animation? And what is the crouching animation that is to be used? As I said again, it's really something that is just done with kind of the upper body area. Now opening the WID, we just really exchange everything that points to longsword. One is this B weapon here, that is showing which animation blueprint to be used. In a perfect world, we have all the animations necessary, but here we just use the unarmed animation blueprint and plug our weapon specific just on top of that. If you, for example, look at the pistol animation blueprint from the shooter core, you see really dozens of animations for walk, for jump, for crouch, for everything that comes with this pistol. In a normal world, you normally don't have all these animations for each weapon. So we're really just cheating here and just take the arm positions more or less and the head positions, and everything else comes from the unarmed. Yeah. So meaning our weapon instance is fine like it is, sticking to unarmed. We close that. Next thing is the ability set. The ability set comes again with the weapon, meaning every weapon will give you abilities that are gone the moment you unequip the weapon. Then we need the actor to spawn, that is this B Argonian Mace. Having a look into it, that is really mostly the mesh that is shown. So if you go here to the components viewport and the skeleton mesh, you see here's actually nothing in it. So we're setting the skeleton mesh to our Argonian Mace. And the material is also fitting. Okay, that's fine already, can be closed. Next thing is the weapon socket that stays under transform. That is something we don't know. How to transform the weapon that it really lies in the hand the right way. That is weapon specific, something we have to figure out. Okay, for the moment that's fine enough. Let's save it. And going back here, we use at the moment here the standard weapon spawner from the shooter game. I will modify that a bit later here actually to make it a bit simpler to use. If you look at spawner or weapon spawner, you will find in the shooter core an example that you really just can plug in into your project if you want to. That's quite easy to use, but on the other hand, it has some logic that is not as desirable, like for example some widgets and the Lyra inventory that you might not need or want to use. I will show you later how to get rid of that. For the moment, we just do another copy and call them longsword and Argonian Mace. And going in here, in the details, we filter to Lyra, and you see you can set the color here, you can set the time until it gets your new weapon, if you get some armor for the weapon, and most importantly, what kind of weapon definition to be used. So here again we use our Argonian Mace, and actually I had to restart Lyra. Or the editor to really see the mace, so it might be the same for you. Then here, looking at the pickup definition, that should be of course not the sword but the Argonian Mace. Oh, we don't have a static mesh yet, so we just re-import the FBX file in a new directory, otherwise it will just re-import with the same parameters. Here we say no skeleton mesh please, and then it creates a static mesh, simple as that. Yeah, grumbling. And here you see my static mesh should be SK for static mesh, SM for static mesh, and then we can move it to our meshes directory. Yeah, now we have one. We have the skeleton mesh, the static mesh, the physical asset, and the skeleton. So back to the pickup. Now we have actually our Argonian Mace that can be picked up as static mesh, not mess. And last thing is the inventory item. As I said, you have to set it, otherwise the spawner will not work, but I'm not too keen to use the inventory at this point. Next thing is the ID, inventory definition. Yeah, we replace as always everything looking into the sword or pistol or whatever you use as a template to your new weapon and compile it and be done. Not much logic in there. And now let's have a look how it looks. Here's my weapon, and yeah, I kind of have it. Yeah, looks not bad, maybe a slight too big. On the other hand, look at the left hand, that's not looking that great. So meaning here we have a problem that we don't know exactly what the left hand should do when using that weapon. It's a two-hand weapon, so something is amiss here. First thing, we want to know what is the transform for that weapon. I added a new socket to the weapon _R. I called it weapon R preview. Simply having a new socket in the skeleton that is not used, that makes it easier for me to do transformations here, and they are ignored in the game because nobody knows that the socket exists. So that is now my normal transformation, and obviously not really working for us, so let's reset that. Looking a bit better, a bit big maybe, so let's go to a scale of 1 point. No, it's a small one, maybe 15 or 2. That looks like a two-hand weapon now. 1.5, yeah, that's about right, I would say. And then we scale and rotate and transform everything until it kind of fits. That looks actually quite good, I would say. Yeah, that's around where it should be for a one-hand weapon, I presume, at least. Important are these transforms that we now have here. That should be also 15. That is something that we now can easily copy over to our WID file. So let's open that. And here you see the attached transforms. We just passed in what we just derived here. We don't have a rotation, but here we have a scale. And passing that also in, compiling, and good. So now the weapon should look much, much better. But first, let's have a look what we have to do to really get the socket positions right. If you look at the infographic, you see that we have to modify the animation blueprint mannequin base. And we have to feed our weapon-specific animation blueprints. So they need to be linked with the ABP mannequin base. First thing, we just cache the pose and use this cached item later. Next thing is we want to blend poses by bool and layered blend per bone. The blend poses by bool, that is just asking for a bool to use the one or the other. The layer blend per bone will mix your upper and lower animations, lower body animations. So here we have this bool indicator is crouching, and then depending on that, we either use the is crouching or a standing one, the two animations that we selected a bit earlier. The other in pose is of course our cached pose, and now we have this layered blend per bone where we filter on the spine 5, so very, very high in the skeleton. Only spine 5 and up will be replaced by our animations. Then we have the left and right hand sockets. This is a 2-bone IK that has a kind of 3-bone chain that defines where the hand and the arm, the underarm will be, or the lower arm will be. Important is this bool that are fed that defines how much it actually has effect. And then at last we see if it's a 2-hand weapon or not. That actually decides if it's used or not. At the end of the thing, we just see if actually the Argonian Mace, for example, is in use, and if not, we just ignore the whole thing and just use the in-post post. The question is now, how do we get these transforms that are variables, how do we get them into our weapon-specific blueprints? If you look here at the public variables, you see they are here. So they are defined in this weapon-specific animation blueprint. We just have to feed them through something else. This something else is actually our ABP mannequin base. So let me clean up here a bit, that we see something. Good. So the ABP BA base, that is a child class that are derived from the mannequin base. That makes it a bit easier to store custom logic, because I of course want to modify the original Lyra mannequin base as less as possible. First thing here on initialize, I set the pan owner and answer the question if it implements the hero, the iHero interface. We remember all these variables because they will be used in every single frame to either return or not the sockets. So every frame we see if it has a pan, it implements the iHero. If yes, it will get the left hand socket and set a variable for it, and the right hand socket and set a variable for it. That happens in every frame in the main thread, meaning that is something that we really make sure to make as cheap and fast as possible. Otherwise we will create lag in our game, simple as that. In Blueprint it cannot be done actually in the background, that would be easier, but we are not there yet in Blueprint. You would have to code it as a component in C++. Looking here in the components, you see it's just a function in iHero, and our character, our BPBA hero, actually implements this class. We saw it in former videos. Filtering red weapon, there are two functions that needs to be filled. The one is get weapon left hand socket transform and right hand. In both cases, it just gets the weapon mesh, looks at the socket, looks at the transform, and returns it. Question is how to get the weapon mesh. That's astonishingly complicated, actually, and it needs to be fast. So how do we do that? In most cases, we want to use the cached item. So first thing is we actually look If there's a component manager, we see if there's actually a weapon attached. All the weapons here derive from the BPBA weapon and instance. And then we have a look if it's a new mesh or an old one. Only if it's a new one, we set a new one and put a Boolean indicator, a new weapon has been found. If not, we will just refer to the cached version, so the variable. So meaning, if it's a new weapon and if that is wrong, we just use and return the cached mesh. That is very, very fast. That's fine. If it's a new one, we have a problem. We really have to get that one. We have to see if it's a single one. We have to cast it to a B weapon. That's not nice. Casting is very expensive. And only then we can set it in our variable, because the next time we will be sure to return the cached variables and not the original one. So be very, very careful here what you do, because it's done once per frame. Good. Now, how do we link our weapon-specific animation blueprints and past device variables? We have to go here in the ABP mannequin base. It's important because that will be overwritten each time you update Lyra, so be careful here. Best thing is actually we would have done everything, including the socket transforms, in this blueprint thread safe update animation using this property access. Property access is absolutely great. It allows you to do things in the background without going to your main thread. Big problem is we cannot access the skeleton of the equipped weapon here. That is something you would have to do in C++ to make that thread safe. We cannot do that. We can access a lot, including our pan and skeleton, but only from the hero, not from the weapon. So that is something that we cannot really manipulate. So this great option for the moment is not accessible to us. That's the reason we actually use it in Blueprint with the main thread. So closing that, have a look at the anim graph. And here you see it's doing a lot of things, setting also foot and hand IK and skeleton controls and so on. And at the very end, we plug in our linked animation layers for both, in our case here, the longsword and the Argonian Mace. The couple of variables that you need here is longsword, is crouching, 2 transforms, and is it 2-hand or not. These are variables that we will set as we saw, for example, here in the ABP BA base, and put them in here. As the BA base is a child of the mannequin base, you actually see all the variables here. So going to the mannequin base, you see the property mapping, and I set it up here that all the properties, the booleans, are mapped to certain gameplay tags. So we steer the whole thing over gameplay tags and just can really point here Boolean variables to that gameplay tag and use the Boolean variable. That is all done again outside the main thread, so that is extremely resource. That is great for resources, and that is what you should use, but it only can be done in this mannequin base reliably. Okay, so we have a couple of booleans, we set them, we pass them, and then hopefully we should be able now to pass them to our hero holding a weapon. So going again to the weapon spawner, I modified it a bit simply because a couple of things. Here's the one that I modified, and here's the one from the shooter core. A couple of things are components that I don't want to use. So I will come back to the components. It has some certain areas in the game where it's actually active or not. Then it looks at the weapon, it plays a couple of effects. It can give you ammo if you already have the weapon. But more importantly, here is using the Lyra inventory component, and it's using the Lyra quick bar. It's a graphical widget. Both things are okayish to use. The big problem with the inventory is just not finished, so you cannot really use it productively. That has a lot of errors, so I don't want to use it. I really just want to have a bare bone weapon equip spawner, nothing else. And that is what we do here. So that is actually one equip. Let's go to the Lyra weapon pickup, give weapon. And that is really the bone of it. It's just going, it actually will just fire on the server. It will unequip all weapons that's found, and then it will just equip an item and be done. So that is exactly the logic that you also can use without using the spawner at all. You can use a couple every invent on that and just equip the weapon the moment somebody is running over something or something happened. So Lyra inventory and stuff we will look at later, but for the moment I think they're not really ready for production. Again, the spawner, the modified spawner can change the color and so on. Important thing is you still have to select a weapon pickup definition. You also have to select the equipment definition. That's a bit cumbersome to have both menus here now. Problem again is that you would have to extend it in C++ to be able to put it into one menu, but it's just cosmetic at the end. So let's look what we did. I grab a sword, I run here, all the things are working. Let's go to Quinn and have a look. Quinn is holding a sword quite well, I would say. Left and right hand are working quite fine. Single hand is also quite working. So I think that gives us a basis to equip whatever we want. And next question, of course, is what do we do with the weapon now? Thank you very much for listening. Bye.